Okay, we're recording. Go.
All right, here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson, D. Mike. Welcome to the science of fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? You get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method. That's just a smarter way of analyzing statistical data and putting it to use, much like you would in either biology or meteorology. And joining me as he does each and every week, he is the professor after all. It's John Bush. John, welcome back.
Hey, Dennis. I'm recording this for our site as well. So, because we're going to get into some metrics and some figures, including your latest article, which I'm excited to chew out a little bit because you and I really haven't bounced some of your things that you brought up together. So we'll have some spontaneous discussion there. But anyway, the icon I use, you have the D with the orange. Dennis, you need to get something better than that. Maybe a picture of your dog or cat. And my picture is my dog. That is Thorin Barkenshield, and he's got a milk bone in his mouth. And he's kind of looking scared because my hand was getting too close to the bone. So he was thinking he might have to fight me, blood fight for the milk bone there. So that's what all that's about. So we're in June, June 21st today. You and I are heavily into best ball beta testing right now. I did see a little discussion about mock drafts, and you brought up what we're doing with the $5 best ball, which I thought was, people should, that's my opinion, is people should use best ball as you rightly pointed out, as a test for the early rounds, and then kind of wet your whiskers for those late round waiver wire pickup that you'll probably be picking up throughout the season. A lot of that rounds 17, 18, 19, and 20, a lot of those cats will probably be floating out there on redraft, and you're already ready to cherry pick. You're already watching, and you can just reach out there and grab them. So there's a lot of goodness to doing that. And you and I have further use we're testing concepts, and I'm in my second wave of concepts, and we'll uh, fill people in. And we probably should circle back maybe next week, Dennis, on the joint draft that we had. We left off about round 11 or so. So we need to finish out that draft and discuss how we ended up at the end and what we think about that draft that we uh, accidentally jumped into.
Yeah, and there's actually some benefit to going head to head with another person who is using a somewhat similar data set, because it
Yes.
does give you a little feel for how are you going to do against almost your own strategy. And that's important to understand. And, before we talk a little bit more about the philosophy of fantasy football, I just put out an article this week, philosophically speaking, and I'm going to break down each position the way I look at it from a strategy point of view in the various formats that I play. But the thing that's bothering me this week more
What?
than
You have a gripe?
it's bothering me.
No, Dennis.
I have
No.
a gripe. It's unbelievable that I have a gripe,
I
and
know. I
I
know.
have a gripe in the real world too. But I have
Ooh.
a gripe in the fantasy football world. In the real world, we've been in like 90s for high temperatures, which is a little warmer than usual for us. Down there, you'd call it a pleasant spring day.
It's the
Uh,
humidity
it,
for us down.
it's the
If we
humidity.
have 90s low humidity, it's a balmy day. We love it.
Yeah, here we've been relatively like middle ground on humidity, not as bad as we usually get. in the summertime, but temperature wise, we've been about 7 to 8 degrees higher, both on the morning low and the afternoon high. But in this local area, it's the weirdest thing, Professor, because when the temperatures heat up,
Yeah.
it's like all the drivers are pedaling their vehicles because they all slow down.
It's like bedrock, right?
They can't figure out how to press the accelerator down when it's hot outside. And this includes the people that have their air conditioning going full blast. I never understand it, but that's my gripe for the real world. My gripe for the fantasy football world, Professor,
Yep.
are these people, these people who make the audacious, this great claim, this audacious claim in June that so and so is going to be the greatest wide receiver for this season. He's going to be the WR1. There's no doubt. Or they say, oh, you're picked for WR1. There's no way he's going to be so. This idea that we go in to this season this early in the draft process before camp has even started, and we know it all as if we have this flawless crystal ball or this magic 8 ball that never gets it wrong, when the reality should be that we can honestly look ourselves in the mirror and admit, when it comes to forecasting the future in fantasy football right now on June 21st, we don't know what we don't even know yet. You have to be honest with yourself to understand this whole concept of range of logical conclusions, and maybe even this far out, range of possible conclusions.
Yeah.
I've
and Dennis, I'm going to throw something up on the screen, and then after you're griping, let's talk about this. I think you're going to like this, my box and whisker. Go ahead about that range.
Oh, absolutely love it. So, yeah, I've seen people, Professor, telling me that Ladd McConkey of the Chargers, the rookie wide receiver, was going to have over 100 catches this season. There's no doubt he might have 120 catches this year. Wow. He's gonna he could be threatening rookie records.
It sounds like you ought to mortgage your dynasty farm to get him then, right?
So here's the only problem with that.
In 39, there is a problem. Okay.
There's a problem. Okay. In 39 college games that he played, he had a total of 119 receptions. And there's people telling me, Professor, that he's going to have more receptions rookie year in the pros than he had his entire college career. And yes, it's possible. Mm-hmm. Is it probable? No. But we have to admit to ourselves that when it comes to fantasy football, we don't know what we don't know. We can make some great assumptions. We can have some ideas.
I've got some data to talk about.
Yes. The other day, Professor, I made the statement that either Garrett Wilson or Drake London would not finish in the top 10 this year in fantasy football at wide receiver in weekly value. And the question I got was, which one? I said, that's my point. Either Drake London or Garrett Wilson will disappoint us this year versus where they're being drafted, which is top 10. They've never finished top 10, even close to top 10 in weekly value and points per game and year-end value, whatever. And people are projecting both of them to finish in the top 10. It's possible. But I think it's more likely that one of them disappoints us. But right now on June 21st, I don't know which one it's going to be. And it's okay to not understand that.
In my deep lessons on ADP versus end of the season for wide receivers, we could look historically at wide receivers in the top 6 by ADP, the next 6, and then we can look at the outcome. Doesn't mean that, it shows what's happened before, right? It's, what is it? Past performance doesn't mean future performance, but it's something to start. So there is data out there for people to use. You can check out the articles. I've got on the screen another way to look at what's possible. This stuff, Dennis, will probably be hitting in, I don't know, a couple weeks at one of the shows, but since you brought this up, I'm circling back around, but focusing using my box and whisker, which is a way to see exactly the range of the ceiling and the floor for draft sectors and into the season ADP PPR fantasy points. So we know what's gone before. I mean, there could, who knows what happens, could be an injury, whatever. But it tells you what's happened in the past, and that's all we got, right? And so this is just showing the top RBs drafted in the first within the top 24 slots, not top 24 RBs, but top 24 ADP. There's, quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers. Historically, from 2020 to 2023, the best has been 30 points per game average, a player, probably CMC, I'm not 100% sure. But the worst was 11.6. Look at that. That's 20-point difference in the extremes.
Wow.
Now, yeah. Now, the the main group is 18 to 14. Okay, so that's kind of an expectation there. So if people are drafting and thinking they're going to get the top of the whiskers 25, the 30 is so out there, it gets its own little dot there. But yeah, so but the data would suggest probably around 17 points is kind of an average thing. So you can have an expectation and then you can have floor and ceiling. So I'll have this data for all positions. You and I will go deeper into this. We can look at patterns and things. I just wanted to throw this out, Dennis, to say this is our solution to the problem. The third part of this wheel is your draft diary. How good am I or Dennis or anybody else at taking this information and making it work for them? I mean, that's the bottom line. And I hope all our readers and listeners, they'll take okay, Dennis said this. Did that work out for you? For instance, your article we're going to discuss, you've got some really interesting strategy on different league format. They should write that down and say, okay, I'm going to, really stick close to this. And if it doesn't work, man, that Dennis, he really effed me over this year. Yes, don't spend $500 or, your whole bankroll on trying to follow Dennis letter by letter. Folks, do some beta testing this year. Take one of the best ball. They have, Superflex, and go try Dennis's for $5 and just see what happens. Did you win? Did you get in the top 3? Were you at the bottom? You need some feedback of your skills. And that's why I have my lesson plan on draft diary, and I think I've even updated it last year. So it's somewhere out there for us. So that's why I wanted to bring this up, Dennis. I didn't want to break your mojo, but there is there's two ways to do it. This is one way, and you and I. So don't worry, folks. We're going to get back to this. If it's like, man, I like this. I've covered this information, but in a deeper format in previous. So you got to go digging, and you got to hear my a bad Southern accent here. People always say I sound like I'm from Texas. Born in born in Arkansas, lived in Louisiana most of my life, but I sound like I've got that West Texas or that Texas drawl. And what happens is northern Louisiana is different than southern Louisiana. Southern Louisiana is more the
Oh yeah.
Cajun and whatnot. So I sound more like I'm from Dallas than even though I was born in Arkansas, I know I don't. So when we have to call the hogs here every night, Dennis, my pig suey doesn't work. The cows come, the longhorn cattle show up at my house, not the pigs, and my neighbors are disappointed in me because I can't pig suey good down here in Arkansas. But anyway, I did want to bring up the boxing whiskers and what's gone on before. So please continue
Eh,
on that, or should we segue into your great article that I'm excited to talk about?
yeah, let's segue into that. But
Okay,
before I
I'm
do that,
sorry,
I'm
Dennis.
going to give you, no, I'm going to give you some props because there are so many great video lessons that you have put together over the years. And
Yes.
you share all of this information. And I don't care what the topic is, you are so thorough in how you go through this stuff that, in my opinion, you have this great knack of teaching people what they need to learn. And you're right though. Use your diary and
Yeah. Does this work for
have a
you?
game plan. And this is what really got me going on this philosophically speaking article. And as I got going in it, I told you, earlier today, my goodness, this thing's going to get long. I better break it down by position.
Boy, you
So
did.
we released the quarterback
Dennis's novel.
strategies. Yeah, it's whenever an article of mine looks like it should start, it was the best of times, it was the
It's
worst of
worst of
times.
times. Yeah.
That's when you got to break it up into smaller bites. But
Yeah.
but
And this is up
this
on the site. So folks, y'all can visit sciencefantasyfootball.com. There is tons of press, podcasts, all sorts of stuff. But today we're talking a fantasy football story at quarterback. Dennis's philosophy. I know it's hard to get Dennis to talk, folks. Y'all don't realize that I have to send him some medicinal stimulants. I said, Dennis, I need you to get you a couple of Red Bulls here. And so I have to kind of build his confidence for him to talk. And he is in the zone right now. So Dennis, why don't you continue? I shouldn't tease you like
oh and yeah, and I'm even more lively this week because
that. Yeah.
my wife got me one of these circle things. Have you heard of circle?
Oh yes, the one with the different flavors.
Cirkul.
Yeah, the different flavors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So So I've got a grape one that is like an
Ooh.
energy drink, but it doesn't
Oh.
wire you
Mhm.
like a Red Bull. It's like drinking a cup of coffee, but in the
Just
summertime I don't like hot coffee. So
be careful.
it's
Some of
yeah.
those things, Dennis, as a biologist, some of my students years ago, there were two brothers. They're both doctors now. So, I'm not going to mention their names because they probably don't want to hear this, but they would come into one of my 3-hour tests and they would pop one of those early energy drinks. And this is, hide the
Oh,
kids
yeah.
what the name of the drink was, Dennis. And it's not politically correct. It was called Pimp Juice, PIMP, and they pulled it out the first
Oh,
time, and
yeah.
all the other students like, what is this? And I said, okay, guys, before we start the test, what is this pimp juice? And all, this is college, not high school. And Oh, this helps us think. Okay, fine. You can drink your. So anyway, I looked on the ingredient and I have one I haven't opened. It's probably 20 years old. I will never drink it. But I looked on the back and there was a name. It said extract from this seed from South America. So lo and behold, I looked
Ooh.
up to the biochemistry. It's like natural ephedra. It's like natural speed. I'm telling you,
Oh boy.
yeah. And those guys, they look, they both killed it. They're probably saving lives, but I hope that hey, if you're listening, Noah and your brother, you guys know no more pimp juice. Dr. Bush says put that stuff up. Anyway, so Dennis, I'm not going. I tell you what, in case when we're going to the expo, I'll carry a little sample, just a little cup full of pimp juice, and if you feel a little low, I'll let you take a little shot of it, and then we'll get you going again. So, folks, if you see Dennis at the expo, ask him about Dennis, Dr. Bush's pimp juice, and see what you get there. Go ahead. I hope your wife's not in
if
the
you
room.
see me running laps,
Yeah, yeah.
if you see me running laps on the football field,
Smoke coming
you
out of
kind
the
of
ears
understand. If
like in
I'm
the Munsters. Grandpa
I,
Munster would drink one of his
right.
potions and smoke would come out of his ears. I remember the Munsters.
if I'm break
Love Grandpa.
if if I'm breaking 4-6 at the 40, I've had too much. But anyway, getting
Anyway,
back to my article,
yeah.
you got to have a philosophy for drafting a team, okay? But it reminds me, I years ago, Professor, believe it or not,
Uh,
I was like the shortest kid in class. So, growing up, so I learned how to box because you had to be a little tough if you're the little kid in class. So I actually did a little boxing when I was
yeah,
in high school,
yeah.
just kind of playing around with it, learning the ropes. And there was a famous line in boxing, and I forget which boxer said it, but one of the famous boxers say, you got to have a plan. Everybody's got a plan until they get hit. And that's the game plan mentality going into a fantasy football draft. You have to have a philosophy. Your philosophy needs to be adapted to wherever you're drafting. So my philosophy from position 1 is going to be different versus 6 versus 12 in a 12-team draft. I'm going to go into the draft with the same list of players. I always look at each round by round, and I say, okay, here's the 3 to 5 guys at each position that I want if they're available. Now, obviously, in one quarterback drafts early on, that first round may or may not include a quarterback or a tight end. I
There hadn't been
usually
a quarterback taken in a PPR draft that I've seen since
no,
what
it
2013 or so, at
doesn't
least.
make sense.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. You're going way too early.
Yep.
Even at the 12th pick, you're going way too early. Now, 2-1, maybe you do go back with the best quarterback if that's based on what's happened the first 11 picks. It's very rare, but it could happen. But you have this game plan going in that says, okay, here's my 3 to 5 guys at each position. Some positions, like maybe tight end, I might have one that first round. But the idea is to come up with that list of first round safe guys, second round safe guys, and so on. And now you're prepared for anything that can happen in the draft. What if you go to a draft? Let's say it's a live draft for a home league, and you don't know your draft position until you draw it out of the jar before the draft starts. How are you going to be ready if you don't go in with a philosophy that says these players are my safe havens in round 1 at each position? And you don't want 20 of them because there's obviously not 20 guys that fit that bill. And I've arrived at the number of 3 to 5. That's my max at each position, each round. And if I have to borrow from the next round, if I'm out of guys, that I do. Or if I've got some leftovers, I kick them down to the next round. But you have to have an adaptive style of drafting. I saw another guy today make a great statement that zero RB might have become too popular. And by doing so, it's pushing the values in different directions, because if everybody's on the same strategy in a very set draft strategy where I'm going to follow this game plan, I'm going to follow this, it's like following your GPS when it's off and driving into the lake, if that's what your GPS tells you to do. You got to have a more adaptive style in fantasy football, because I got news for you folks. If 8 people show up to your 12-team draft using zero RB, those zero RB guys are going to be toast, because it's going to change the values. That's why my basic philosophy, philosophically speaking, when it comes to fantasy football, is to be as adaptive as possible. So I might have a game plan, and at quarterback, that game plan is very different in every type of fantasy football. But my basic philosophy stays the same in redraft, best ball, super flex, one quarterback. I want elite quarterbacks, because my diary has told me I have been more successful the last couple of years when I've loaded up at quarterback in any style of league. This article that I wrote, Professor, philosophically speaking, at quarterback, this applies for 2024 only. This might not work in 25 or 26, but this year, this is my game plan going into drafts, and we will know at the end of the season if it's successful or not. Remember, I get back to my gripe and I remind myself every time I look in the mirror, right now on June 21st, I don't even know what I don't even know. I need to be honest with myself that a lot is going to happen between now and week 1 in the real football season.
And let me, Dennis, I just happened to do, me, some a quarterback, and I wanted to share kind of the information that I have here. Let me share this. Okay, so my philosophy this year is guided by what's gone on from the last 4 or 5 years. And Dennis, what you're looking at is draft sectors for one QB. And this is, and I know you've heard this and I've said it, but this is why 72nd pick or earlier, that's where I want to get my quarterback. The reason is, if you look at the patterns of what's gone on before, that is the last boat off the island. And I even started in this figure and notice the roller coaster goes. I understand there are draft sectors where things have done well, but if you start looking, you start seeing it gets dicey right after that. Not saying you again, if your diary says Bush didn't know what he's talking about, I can pick the last quarterback and make it work. Great. I hope you win. But for me, that is my philosophy. And when Dennis was discussing, I'm like, shoehorning his rules of thumb on top of kind of this drop dead zone here. And for me, I have that marked, Dennis. You can see the averages for each draft sector. And of course, the top to pick 30. I mean, we're talking, the top 2, 3 quarterbacks. You pay for it, but the data says it tends to be fairly good. It's not guaranteed, but the goodness is from 13 to 36, it's like 29 to 20, worst case scenario of fantasy points per week. That's pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. So I'm going to stop this just to let folks know. Dennis and I will circle back to this in a couple weeks, but that's just what that's my starting point. And so now, since I know that, I can steal from Dennis's ideas. You see, what is it? Genius steals. So Dennis has helped me, his pattern searching, his philosophy. He cut his teeth at the racetrack as I did. He understands money management and game theory, and all that rolls into a nice gumbo. And my play is even much better under that. But using my metrics and my diary, everything has worked well. But I'm not, Dennis, I get real nervous after about the 6th or 7th round and I hadn't got a quarterback. I scared. Or down here, I'm scared. I'm scared. And, when the hillbillies are brewing their moonshine, they hear a truck. Uh-oh, is that the revenuers? They're scared. So that's how I feel at about that 6th or 7th round. So the philosophy that I work with, do I want to take one early or late? And it can depend on what the people give me. So you're talking about philosophy. That's my philosophy. If they will let Jalen Hurts slide to the 4th round, he's mine. That kind of thing. If they get greedy and start going crazy and taking quarterbacks too soon, get a run, then I might be taking the 6th round quarterback in the 5th round if they're running out. I mean, you don't want to be at the end of the run. You want to start the run. But break glass in an emergency, I kind of know my quarterbacks, and these are the last ones. And my emergency one this year is Brock Purdy. If I miss out, he's down in the 8th, maybe 9th. So he's my okay. And then if it's really bad, Dennis, I'm going to have to stream. I'm going to have to grab 3 or 4 quarterbacks and just stream. That's the worst case scenario. So those are things I frame on top of your rules of thumb. And I only play in one QB league. So this is the 2 paragraphs that I focused on when Dennis talked about it. So Dennis, why don't you go through your strategy there on 1 quarterback leagues?
Yeah, my basic strategy can be defined very easily because I used to be that guy years ago. We're talking 10, 15 years ago. And later, I've been doing this for 30 plus years, folks, playing fantasy football. And in the old days, you lined up as many good running backs as you could early.
Yep.
And you didn't worry about quarterback because the 12th quarterback and the first quarterback, actually I look at the average or the median of the first 3 quarterbacks taken versus the 12, and the difference wasn't that great. So I was beating them at running back and wide receiver. Heck, back in those days, you mainly streamed tight ends because there weren't that many good ones. And if you didn't get the top guy, you didn't worry about tight end either. The times have changed over the years. And, 1 quarterback league, 12 teams, Professor, I only draft 1 quarterback. That would give me another roster spot to have more running backs, more wide receivers, and maybe 2 tight ends. But the way the game has changed, I have changed my philosophy where it comes to one quarterback leagues. I never leave a one quarterback league without 2 really good quarterback options, because defenses have gotten much, much better over the years. And the consistency gap now, when a quarterback plays a great defense versus a so-so defense, is different. And the ironic thing is, if it's a great team that they're playing against, the quarterback's going to have better stats. It's reverse of what you sometimes think it will be. And I know we'll go over that throughout the season as well. But with quarterbacks, I like to have 2 options most weeks. And I like to be protected for my bye week, because more players are selecting 2 quarterbacks than ever before in fantasy football and redraft. So I want to have 2 shots at that. So there's 2 philosophies that will run, and I don't hold myself to either one of these philosophies. They're just general philosophies. The earlier I take my first quarterback, the later I'm going to take my second quarterback. If I take a quarterback later, if I'm close to that pick 72, I'm probably coming back with another quarterback really quick. So I might grab a quarterback in the 60s and then one before pick 72. So I have both of my quarterbacks by the time that roller coaster ride starts. But let's say I draft a quarterback early. And by early, that term is more the number of quarterbacks that are gone, not so much the round. In a 1 quarterback best ball draft, I got to pick 4.9, so the 9th pick in the 4th round. So pick 45, Mahomes was still on the board. Hurts and Allen were gone, but Mahomes was still on the board. And I looked at the other available players at running back and wide receiver, and there wasn't anybody I could live without. In fact, I was going to drop down a round if I went running back or wide receiver. So at that much of a bargain to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks, who I think is going to have a better season this year because he's got more wide receivers to choose from. I think that offense for Kansas City is going to be very different than it's been last year, where they were very, very conservative. I think they're opening the game plan up again. I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on offenses. But the key was, he was a bargain where I was getting him. So that was an early quarterback decision. So the earlier I take a quarterback like a Mahomes, a top 3 guy, in a draft, the later I feel like I can wait to get that second quarterback. The other option that I love, the other strategy that is really going to, I think, work quite well this year, take a running quarterback and back him up with somebody who is the typical pocket passer. And when you say pocket passer, it doesn't always guarantee that you're not going to get hurt. Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers are the most pocket passers of pocket passers. And they both went down in the pocket with Achilles injuries. So you can get burned on that, but you won't get burned if you have 2 quarterbacks. You know, I even had some drafts last season, Professor, where I had both Joe Burrow and Kirk Cousins. Yeah. Those were my 1A and 1B quarterbacks. Both went down. So I was playing Browning and Flacco by the end of the year, and then they both performed just fine. But the key is, if I go for a running quarterback, I want an alternate type of quarterback. So this year, I would draft guys like Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, or Jaden Daniels, the rookie even. I'll take a shot on him, but not as my only quarterback. And I'll back them up with a pocket passer like Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff. And in the case of Richardson, you're taking him early because he's about the 5th or 6th quarterback off the board. Then I'd come back with a Goff or a Purdy or a Herbert. Love those guys. But in the case of, if let's say Murray and Richardson are gone and I haven't picked yet a quarterback, and I take, I'm not waiting till the 16th quarterback to grab Jaden Daniels. I'm grabbing a Jordan Love or a Brock Purdy. So I'm getting a guy that's going to be 8th or 10th or 11th off the board. And then I'm backing him up with a guy that's got some upside potential if he hits as a rookie. In Washington, they didn't really particularly set themselves up with a great backup quarterback. Denver has a really solid backup quarterback opportunity. I mean, Jarrett Stidham is not exactly a world beater, but he's a good backup. So if the rook isn't ready, they're going to put him out there. New England grabbed Jacoby Brissett to pick up Drake May, but if Drake May's not ready, Brissett will be in there.
Yep.
So you got to look at your situations. And in Minnesota, they've got a couple of options that will probably play ahead. Darnold or Mullins could play ahead of the rookie, J.J. McCarthy. So you've got a situation in Washington, though, where Jaden Daniels is starting week 1. Caleb Williams is starting week 1 for the Bears. He's another quarterback I wouldn't be shy to take at his current ADP. But I'm going to have, especially if I draft a rookie, I'm going to have a veteran. So I'm not going to take an Anthony Richardson and a Jaden Daniels. They're very similar, and they both could go down with injuries if they get a hit, because they are going to be running the ball a lot more than a Brock Purdy or a Jordan Love or a Jared Goff or a Justin Herbert. But there are a lot of value quarterbacks that are there. My top 3 quarterbacks this year: Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. But as I said, in 1 quarterback leagues, I'm not really worrying about getting one of those top 3. But once 3 are off the board, I start shopping, because I know that it drops pretty sudden, and I'm not sure where that drop is going to be. But here's the other advantage, Professor. Let's say I only hit one before that 72nd or 72nd pick, and I grab a guy later in the draft before pick 100. I might catch those outliers, but I've also got some insurance in case my top quarterback goes down. That's my philosophy in 1 quarterback leagues. Is it the right philosophy to have for 2024? It was a good philosophy to have in 23. I was pretty sure I wanted top 4 or 5 quarterbacks off the board last year, and that's the strategy that I employed, and it was very successful. This year, I'm thinking a similar strategy will work, but I think the window of opportunity for quarterbacks is pretty good. Last year, I loved Jordan Love. I thought he was the value guy. He was going so late last year, Professor. He's going a lot earlier this year. People caught on, but he was going like he was the 16th, 17th, maybe the 18th quarterback taken last year. And in that position, he was my 2nd quarterback taken. Not a bad guy to have as your 2nd quarterback taken, because top 5 in weekly value by season end. But don't paint yourself into the corner by only taking 1 quarterback, and certainly don't take that 1 quarterback late. Double up, have 2 chances at quarterback to have a guy that's going to be really elite. And don't be afraid later in the draft to toy with these older guys too. I know Kirk Cousins is coming off of injury. I know Aaron Rodgers hasn't done anything for almost since Trump was president. But, they've got the back class. I love that term that you coined recently. They've got the back class of having done something great in their careers. Matthew Stafford is another guy. Don't be shy to take one of those older quarterbacks. I don't know if I'd take two of them. I don't know if I'd double up with Cousins and Rodgers, both coming off of Achilles tears. But take one of those older guys and team them up with one of those more likely to be elite younger guys, and you've got a combination. But the key is before you sit down to go into your draft, have an idea. I usually take the ADP and I circle the guys that are acceptable to me. And as they get crossed off, and if I know I've got 7 guys that I'm targeting as my top quarterback, and then I've got another 6 guys maybe that I'm targeting as my backup, and I get to the point where 5 of those are off my board and it's time to pick, and I've got another 12 picks before my next pick, you better believe I'm looking quarterback, because I do not want to get stuck without one of my top guys. I'll have a list of my expected quarterbacks that I like more than others. That information I will let everybody have. I don't care if you draft against me. I'll use my own strategy better than you because I know it better. But I will put out my list of acceptable quarterbacks here before the season gets there. I'm not sure exactly what that list is yet, but I am drafting best ball drafts now. And right now, I know who my guys are. And I mentioned some of them in this article.
Yeah, another thing to add, I do draft ADP patterns, positional patterns, Dennis. And so I have the landscape already done. So it's kind of like I've already kind of know where on average these things are happening, where these players are going. I use your MVP. I use my com metrics. I use some of the other data I showed you, the box and whisker. I, I combine multiple data streams to allow me to codify that model in my head of what I should be doing with quarterbacks. And best balls, I've done 20 now. I'm done 10, in the middle of 10 more. By the time mid-August after the expo, I'm ready to just draft every which way but loose. I am chomping at the bit. You know, when you see me in the post parade, Dennis, getting ready, I'm going to be shaking my mane up and down and winking at you saying, put your money on me. So, you know, I'm getting fired up. My tail's corkscrewing. The jockey's having trouble holding me back. Okay, I'm wanting to do the race now. I'm frisky and ready to go, and I'm going to frisk you out of your money if you're in the leagues that I'm in. But I do have pseudonyms to hide because I don't want you. Look, I'm going to take your money. I'm not. I know I play against some of these folks who, these experts. They'll actually yell, you know, whatever's best player, you know, they'll have, you know, it's kind of like, look at me, I'm at this website. Come on, man. You know, don't, you know, hide in the weeds down here. Okay. When you're used to, you know, the feuding with the Hatfields and McCoys, you don't stick your head up out of the weeds, Dennis, and look around. You crawl, you fly low so they won't get you. So I'm gonna have a funny name, you know, and not one of these goofy names. You know, they have all these innuendo names and stuff. I mean, come on, man. The frat days are over, guys. Come on, let's think of some better names than stuff you learned at the frat house. And anyway, so I have all these data streams. I got my model, and I'm ready to crush you like a bug. So that's my mentality. And so I feel if it's a good draft, I feel in control. I know, you know, it's still random and there's things, but that's just the feeling I have versus, oh, it's getting out of control. And if it is, then I start doing other things. But that's why best ball is, I mean, I know we had a debate about mocks and best ball. The reason I do best ball is because it tests you. Because in some of these crazy best people, they'll grab 6 or 7 uh, quarterbacks in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. You and I looked at that. People started doubling up. And now I'm thinking about it. What am I going to do if that happens? Now that I've seen it for $5, okay, if I'm playing, more like a $35 league or something, what am I going to do if that starts happening? How do I respond? Right? I don't want to just kind of, well, what is that over there? Let me stick my head over there and find out. Look, is that a saber-toothed cat? What is that that's done chewed my head? Yeah, what is that? What is it? FAFO, right? F around and find out. Well, I don't do that. I don't, as a biologist, and I did field biology. We went out and we collect snakes, and you don't stick your head in the hole and say, well, what is that? Could be a snake in there. And in Louisiana, I never swam, and boy, that water sure is murky. Wonder what's down there. Well, it's either one of those giant snapping turtles, and you lose a toe, or it was one of those giant ass dinosaur gators, and they just watch you. It's like, yeah, why don't you stick your hand? That's like a drumstick to them. You stick your hand down there and flip it around. That's like Colonel Sanders' drumstick in the water. What do you think's going to happen? So anyway, don't get me going, Dennis. Get me riled up here. Anyway, love this. It frames my attention on how to deal with the redraft one quarterback, and which is different than the superflex, which is next.
Yeah, and here's the thing. When it comes to strategies, there was about 3 years ago, I was just starting to get a little more bold of playing against some people who thought they were hot stuff in fantasy football. And I had my theories, and I was doing well. I knew I was collecting money, and I'd take on a few of these leagues. And I did have a redraft league on ESPN where I was invited to, and all of 11 people were rather prominent writers. I mean, they were all up and coming guys. It was not, the Jim Coventrys and the Bob Harris's world, but they were all pretty up and coming fantasy football Twitter guys. And I did go to their websites and I did read before the draft what they had to say about philosophy of draft. And I felt like that the great scene in the movie Patton, and I don't know if this is true in real life or whether it was made up for the movies, but either way, it's great, where after the big battle, where Patton takes on Rommel, who is the big guy, the Desert Fox, and beats him at his own game, he says, Rommel, you magnificent bastard, I read your book. And that's how I feel in some of these drafts. But here's the key to this strategy that I laid out, Professor. Yeah. I can give this strategy to the other 11 people in the league, and I can still be competitive against them. Why? Because this strategy just lays out a formula. It doesn't tell you round 1, I'm going this way. Round 2, I'm going wide receiver. Round 2, round 3, I'm taking a tight end. Round 4, I'm taking a quarterback. It is not laying it out so stiff for you that people can read it and beat you at your own game. What this is telling you is that you need to be good at thinking on your feet. It's the classic case that fantasy football is a game of 3D chess, not checkers. If you ever played 3D chess, you can never anticipate the next move with certainty of your opponent because you've got too many options. That's what fantasy football is all about, is having so many options that in the middle of a draft, we just started a draft that we stumbled in against each other. And I went into that draft thinking, going to get my quarterback in the 7th round, my first quarterback in the 7th round, maybe the 6th. But as soon as I take one quarterback, I'm going to take 3. Ended up taking Mahomes late in the 4th. Went totally off my original strategy because of the way the draft went. And the biggest difference in Superflex is I want even more options, and I want them earlier, especially in dynasty versus redraft. In dynasty fantasy football, I will throw all my chips in to get those top quarterbacks. If I can end a dynasty Superflex draft with 2 of the top 10 guys that I have ranked, and maybe a 3rd guy that's in the top 15, I'm going to beat you for many years to come because I'm strong at quarterback, and now I can look in different ways in that fantasy league. Maybe I'll struggle week or year 1. And then when I've got a draft pick that's valuable, I can trade it for multiple parts and come out year 2 shining. And that's only if I miss it running back and wide receiver. But usually in Superflex Dynasty, you can wait and at running back and wide receiver and load up on the old guys. But in redraft, I like to sort of lead the way at quarterback. So in other words, in a 1 quarterback league, I'm happy with the 4th best guy. In Superflex, I want 2 top 10 guys. So I'm usually going earlier on my quarterbacks, much earlier. In redraft, I'm getting my 2nd quarterback right away. I'm usually done with my top 2 quarterbacks by round 3. Most Superflex drafts. You just need to be more aggressive. But just like the old days of drafting running backs, when everybody went running back in the first 2 rounds, you would sometimes exhaust the best running backs too early, depending on your draft position, and you would have to be the first to venture off into other positions. Don't be afraid to do that, but put a little more emphasis on the quarterback position because you want 2 tries at that starter. And do I care that the 3rd guy, if my 3rd best quarterback's got the same bye week as one of the other quarterbacks that I already have on the roster? I don't care. In best ball, I do. Best ball, I don't want any overlapping box from my quarterbacks. In redraft, I don't really care. If I'm out of quarterbacks 1 week, I'll figure something out by the time that week gets there if my 3rd quarterback gets hurt. But in Superflex, I will take quarterbacks that I would not touch in redraft. For instance, in redraft, I'm getting my 2 quarterbacks before I have to decide if Will Levis or Bryce Young is going to do it for me this year. But in Superflex, they might be my 3rd quarterback, or in some cases, I will even take 4 quarterbacks in a Superflex league. And people are like, well, you can only use 2. Yes, but my opponent has 2 other guys he can't use. And so sometimes hoarding quarterbacks, depending on how the draft goes, again, I'm not going to take the 25th quarterback before the 2nd or 3rd running back or wide receiver is off the board. I'm still looking at that premium upside elite player, regardless of position. But if I can nab my quarterbacks early, and the way I've got my values laid out, there are going to be some guys that slip through the fingers. I don't understand why Bryce Love is going so far down the list in Superflex. Don't understand why Brock Purdy and Justin Herbert are such values. Those are the guys I'm going to have a lot of in Superflex. Sometimes they'll be my top quarterback. Sometimes they'll be my 2nd quarterback. And then some of the rookies I might have as my third quarterback. So I like to go more premium on quarterback in Superflex. Yes, that's pretty obvious. But I also like to have 3 starters to start the season. And I don't care if that third starter is Bryce Young, Will Levis, or even Geno Smith. And then I will sometimes, quite often, depending on the roster size, but quite often, I'll have a fourth quarterback in a super flex league. Usually in a super flex league, your rosters expand slightly. But even in a 20 player league, I would rather be grabbing a wide receiver or a running back fill in or a tight end than my third quarterback. I don't want to grab a quarterback off the waivers in a super flex league unless I'm grabbing a backup that might suddenly be in play if somebody gets hurt.
My rule for Superflex is probably don't play them. Hey, I'm not going to claim that I'm superior to everything, folks. And I talk about this. I kind of preach on my videos. It's like, what are you paying for some of these leagues, some of these providers, if they're claiming they got everything covered. If it's one person, I understand you have experts, but Dennis, my Superflex history has been sad. Okay. It's shameful. And, that's why I'm sitting back learning from you. And my long-term goal is to get better, but I'm going to be very cautious right now until I've kind of assimilated in. But I do like the running versus the pocket concept. Take them early in Superflex, but don't walk away from the studs and the other one. In other words, don't be afraid not to take something else in the first round. In other words, in a Superflex, if I've got round one, I'm going to consider CMC. Because I know at the turn I'll get 2, but they'll probably be, as you say, starting to get mediocre at that point. But you figure it's got to be enough that I can stream. I'm not confident in Superflex to stream quarterbacks yet. I hadn't got it all figured out yet, but I would probably be conservative and take a quarterback, and you'd probably have an advantage over me because of that. So I'm foolish enough, I realize if I'm sitting down at the Superflex table, I am the sucker at the table. And as long as I know that, I'm not going to risk a lot of money. I would rather take my money and make more money in my redraft, which I make money at. So that's my rule. So I'm watching Dennis. I'm kind of just the old, we have, I don't know what you call them up there, Dennis. I guess you got vultures, turkey vultures, but we call them the road crew here when they get all the,
Yep.
if the hillbillies are a little late grabbing the roadkill for their stew, then the road crew comes in and cleans house. So, hey, and some of the folks I grew up with, Dennis, oh boy, that if there was some twitching left in that roadkill, yeah, they like squirrel a lot. Grandma loves squirrel and dumplings, and if the squirrel's twitching on the road, it's fresh. So, back in the day, back in the Depression, Dennis, if you talk to your great grandparents or grandparents about it, times was tough. And in here in Arkansas, squirrels that were flopping with the Model T hit them, they'd take it home for stew. So
Hey,
that's
around here with my grandfather said, hey, as long as it doesn't have a second set of tire tracks, it's probably
you
fresh
go.
enough.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that's my rule for Superflex is listen to Dennis and do his trick. and he's educating me on that. And unfortunately, dynasty, Dennis, I know we're talking about rules of thumb for dynasty. You took over my league and you got us to third place last year. I give you mad props for that, because the best I got was fifth. The good news, and I know you'll say, I did leave you well on the wide receivers and the tight ends. I had
Oh,
Hawk, but I just couldn't put it all together. And I've been watching your strategy last couple years, and you know, with some luck this year, we can be competitive again in our joint. But I'm floating the entry fee in there, but and Dennis gets we're going to split it down the middle when we eventually win the whole prize. And but right now, that's what I'm doing, is watching Dennis. So I would say, folks, uh, don't, you know, the usually the work I do is one quarterback, you know, PPR drafts, redraft. That's where I excel, and that's where all my metrics, everything has been geared to doing that.
and that's the strategy. That's the king of all strategy philosophies is, you know, your past performances, you
Oh
know
yeah,
where you're stronger
yeah.
and weaker if you pay attention. I tend to play more redraft and best ball one quarterback.
Yes, you
I
do.
play I play a lot more dynasty as super flex. The reason, I know that my track record tells me that I'm better at super flex in dynasty formats than I am at one quarterback
And I
in
will jump
dynasty.
in, Dennis, before you get too wide. Your MVP and your weekly value, I tested them last year, and you excelled. You beat the system at quarterbacks and RBs, and you did just as good with tight ends and wide receivers. So I think, whether it's by chance or whatever, Dennis is good, and his metrics are good as well. So I don't know which came first. I'm assuming Dennis came first and then his metrics, but that is, you have worked in, you've unlocked that key, Dennis, in the quarterback with your MVP and weekly values. And looking forward to the best and some of that other stuff, our beta testing. And I might dip my toes into Superflex. I'm just watching, but I'm proud to be partnered with you, with somebody who has a skill set that I don't have, you know, as refined as yours. So take that and continue on.
Yeah, and when it comes to dynasty in quarterback, the way I approach one quarterback leagues and super flex leagues is actually a lot closer than how I treat one quarterback and super flex leagues in redraft or in best ball. In dynasty drafts, I tend to be a quarterback hoarder. I like as many quarterbacks as we can collect on a team. Our team over on FPPC that I took over, that you said, you know, you were perennial fifth, sixth
Mm-hmm.
type of finisher. So I looked at that team, and you are just chock full. The wide receivers, you are set for a long time, because they're not only good, but most of them are young. And the ones that are getting a little older in the tooth are guys that never were speedsters like Cooper Kupp anyway,
Right.
that will age more gracefully than the high speed guys. So I look at that team and I was like, oh my goodness, we're in good shape. So I looked at the rookie draft and I said, okay, if these wide receivers and running backs are gone last year, we are going to solidify our quarterback situation. You had Aaron Rodgers and Jared Goff at quarterback already. Two great opportunities. You had kind of two veterans that were not going to be the top guys anymore necessarily, but there were two solid guys that you could play matchup data and figure out who had the best matchup on any given week, and you could play that guy. So I was happy with that setup, but I was even more ecstatic when I could quarterback hoard and get CJ Stroud and get Anthony Richardson. How would you like a team, folks, of Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Jared Goff at quarterback, because we traded Rodgers away for another draft pick that we turned into another running back, which was our weakness. So this year, even though the running back class was not elite, I tried to get as many draft picks as I could hoard so we could go in and flash a lot of running backs. And we've got a lot of rookie. We got like 5 or 6 rookie running backs this year.
Nice.
I don't know which one's going to hit, but I got 5 or 6 shots at somebody hitting at running back. And we did the right thing before last season. We made sure we had Chuba Hubbard on the team. We grabbed Ty Chandler. So we had some options at running back. And yeah, we finished 3rd. I was pleased because it was a top 3 finish. It was money. That's all I was looking for last year, was making some money back by finishing in the top 3. And we accomplished that. This year, I feel pretty confident that we can go for the win. We've got great depth at wide receiver. We've got incredible depth at quarterback. We got to weather the tight end position until Hawkinson comes back, but we've got some options there as well. So I like our chances in that league. But my dynasty rule of thumb for quarterback, first of all, even in one quarterback leagues, the leagues tend to be larger roster sizes, so you can afford to carry more quarterbacks. I have a couple of 1 quarterback leagues, Professor, that going into this year, before the rookie draft, I already had 5 starting quarterbacks on the team. Now that gives me the option to trade somebody for some strength at other positions, because quarterback are even in a 1 quarterback league, you got to have a couple of good quarterbacks to compete in dynasty. Because in dynasty, unlike redraft and best ball, you have no idea whether all 3 of your quarterbacks could land on the same bye week. So even in 1 quarterback, I want lots of options so I can take away that random chance as they change the schedule every year. See, and here's where the league's, the decision making, the philosophy is changed. Used to be they'd put the whole division on bye the same week. So if you had an NFC East quarterback and you had an NFC West quarterback, you were sure that you're going to have somebody playing, because one division was out from the NFC, one division was out from the AFC. That was the worst case. And you were pretty good shape if you had 2 NFC quarterbacks. Now the rules are all over the place. They just throw these bye weeks at you randomly. So now it's impossible to know how they're going to land. How do you fight that philosophically? Have more quarterbacks. That's why I hoard quarterbacks, even in 1 quarterback leagues. I've got a league where I've got 6, a super flex league where I've got 6 guys starting at the beginning of this year, because I've grabbed the guys that were next up. Now, granted, maybe I'm wrong, and Jacoby Brissett doesn't start week 1, and Sam Darnold doesn't start week 1. Then I've got 4, but in one of the leagues, I've got 6 guys because I've hoarded quarterbacks. I've hoarded the backups that we're going to probably be changing teams. So if I've got a quarterback backup to somebody like a Brissett, because in Washington, I had a lot of Brissett and Howell last year in dynasty leagues because they were cheap. They were cheap options. I even got Brissett off of waivers before the season. Now I'm set at quarterback because somebody of those two is going to be starting. So I've got at least one starting quarterback that I know of with Washington in a super flex. And now I liked Brissett because his contract was up. So I knew he could be changing teams. And then I ended up with Howell and him changing teams. But the whole thing is you've got to be forward thinking when it comes to the quarterback position. Grab a lot of these guys that are backups. Fill out your roster. Make sure you got maybe in a super flex. I'll have 6 guys at quarterback on my team because I've got the starting running back and wide receiver positions nailed, and I've got an elite tight end, and I got a good backup tight end. So I can afford the roster spots to grab more quarterbacks. And don't be afraid to take the marginal rookies. So I might take some Spencer Rattler in drafts if he falls far enough and stash him on a taxi squad. Dynasty gives you a lot more options with the roster than single season leagues do. And as a result, hoard quarterbacks. Grab as many as you can because they make great trade bait, especially in super flex leagues.
I've seen you how you manipulated. And can I say, folks, the master of the taxi squad, that's Dennis. He is so deep on his hey, your RBs, your whatnot. I made note, and I've been using in best ball and been collecting some of your deep plays. You hadn't found me Puka yet, but there's that one wide receiver. It's like, okay, you implied he could be Puka like, but again, I think the time of the season is not that where some of these people are going to be a little bit more revealed, because you revealed me Puka a little bit. I didn't get him on all my leagues, not even close, but I got him on 5 or 6 because you tipped it at that point. And it was just kind of like, wow, yes, you're right. It's like all the clouds cleared and there was this beam of sunshine and there it was. So right now, Dennis has not made it to that step yet. And maybe he's got to work through his process. And some of this stuff that he's writing about, I think there's more to it, Dennis, than even kind of what you're saying. This is just kind of the main points. But I think what separates you is you're putting it in a gumbo, and I think that's what I do as well. That's what I've seen, is that puts us to the next level. Is we're not just, okay, I am kind of robot. I will take this. I will take that. I will do that. It's no. It's that adaptive. We're circling back around to being adaptive. And I think in your super flex, you've got an idea. When Dennis says adaptive in super flex, dynasty, one quarterback, that can mean a little bit different takes on what that adaptive means. It's adaptive in the environment. So Dennis, I know we talk about defining. Oh, and by the way, folks, Dennis, probably because of me, has defined his terminology. He gave us 10 terms, and you don't see that in a lot of articles. In other words, when you read this article, folks, go down to the glossary first and read through these and think about them, and then let it sit and come back and read it again. In college, when I tell the kids, Dr. Bush, how you study? I said, well, let me tell you, I certainly pay attention to my notes, but I try to put a concept map together, which is basically a landscape of the process. And I said, then all the processes, the terms, you define them and put them there. It's kind of like a Christmas tree. Here's the tree. Well, we put the tinsel, then we put the ornaments. And so you know everything you're doing, you have constructed it. Then in your head, if you need to, you can deconstruct it and move it around if possible. So you could be adaptive. Like, Dennis said, that Christmas tree's got a little too many Kansas City ornaments on it. We need to put some of those Saints ornaments on it. Come on now. Remember your good friend here at Science and Fantasy. You need to at least put a token Who Dat ornament on your tree instead of all that Kansas City hogwash that you do there. And what can I say? Kansas City's crushing it. But anyway,
and we'll,
getting back to adaptive, Dennis, that's what I wanted to bring that up.
well, you're going to be glad to know this, Professor, because I'll give you a preview.
Yeah.
Running back philosophy is coming next, but when I get to my wide receiver philosophy, A.T. Perry from the Saints is a guy that I picked up a lot of late in the year.
Dennis, don't
but no,
I've been drafting him in every one. That's one of the other ones. You gave me 2 wide receivers. You remember the other one? Do you remember the other one you said? From New England?
I do know that I've
New England?
Yes.
The rookie? Polk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Polk.
I said,
is another guy that I'm really high on.
Is Puka-like. So I put in my notes, Dennis hadn't seen him, Puka-like. So A.T. Perry, it says Puka-like. So I've been defining some of his late picks. And of course, his running backs, he's so good at getting them. He's starting to, it's like you got to have about 20 of them there. He sees so much potential. So it's kind of hard to find the ones that he really, really likes because he likes a lot. So that you need to winnow down your hardcore because you're big on those RBs, Dennis. And I love it, but I'm not sure I know the order. I mean, I know what the public says because we've got the ADP, but I don't know what Dennis's ADP. We probably should have a later on, maybe after the expo, kind of like, okay, here's my whole card right here. This is who's going to put money in your pocket. At least this is how I see the ranking.
And that actually is going to be coming.
If we remember.
That is going to be coming soon because after the philosophically speaking set of articles, I'm going to have 2 more sets of articles coming at each position. I'm going to have my safe studs articles, the guys that you can take in the first 4 rounds of the draft.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
A lot of confidence.
Right. Good.
And then I'm going to have, I'm going to have my value guys that are going to all be the guys you could take like last 6 rounds of the draft, 14 and later.
Are we gonna hoard your secret players now? What?
No, we're not gonna hoard them all, but I might not give everybody the
Dennis, the editor gets angry. You did you're better than zero, and you gave them one part of the bank, and now you're gonna give them the rest here. Come on, Dennis.
Well, I will probably only share with you the
secret stuff. Yeah.
The secret stuff. But no, all kidding aside, folks, you got to have a strategy that has multiple players involved. And that's why I say every round of the draft, I got my guys that I really like at each position. And that will come up with, I'll have 40 running backs that I could see myself targeting at different points of the draft from round 1 to round 20. Do I think that all 40 of those running backs are going to finish 1st through 40th in fantasy football weekly value? Of course not. What I look at is opportunity, because when you get that opportunity in fantasy football, you can perform. And that's where I don't stray from ADP that much, though, Professor. If I've got a guy ranked, like Joshua Palmer is one of my wide receivers this year that I'm really high on. I think he is going to be the top wide receiver.
I think he showed some flash last year, if I remember, because he was
Showed
on my waiver wire. I think I collected him in a few leagues.
playing through injuries last year,
Yes, he
and he did
was.
have a few spike weeks when Allen and Williams were out.
Yep.
He's a sizable guy. He's a big target. I think Herbert's going to like him. I think he's going to be maybe the next Mike Williams type who's going to be surprising people. And if he can stay healthy, unlike Mike Williams, we've got a guy that's going to be very valuable. I mentioned Mike Williams, his back class. I don't care about the injury concerns. First of all, I can't predict injuries. Number two, he's priced right. So those are kinds of the guys. That's kind of how I look at it, but it's all based on opportunity. If you've got a shot at targets, another guy, Keon Coleman with Buffalo,
Yes.
the
Yep.
rookie, he's got the opportunity laid out. And I've seen people say, well, Curtis Samuel, last time he was teamed up with this offensive coordinator, he had a career year. His career year was like 34th, 37th in weekly value, depending on how you measure it. That was his career year, folks. So, yeah, he could be a good flex play, but he was never the alpha wide receiver type. So there's two solutions in Buffalo as I see it. If Curtis Samuel is the top target guy in that wide receiver room, it's because the other guys are really close, but just finishing behind him. And all three are very close to each other in target share. You'd have Curtis Samuel, Shakir, and Coleman, whose target share would be very, very close together when you look at just the wide receiver room. I understand Dalton Kincaid's going to have a huge number of targets. Maybe they throw more to the running backs. But the key is who's going to be leading the team at wide receiver in targets? The answer is one of three guys. Curtis Samuel, if he does lead, will have the smallest advantage versus the other two. If Keon Coleman leads that team in targets at wide receiver, it could be a big margin. It could be a Diggs to Davis type margin. No, I'm not saying that the rookie is as good as Stephon Diggs. What I'm saying is he could dominate the target share in a similar manner. I don't think Shakir and Curtis Samuel have that big of a gap versus the other guys. But I think Keon Coleman could. Similar way that I'm looking at the Chargers, you got Ladd McConkey, you got Joshua Palmer, you got Quentin Johnson, who's going to be better than he was last year. It's not setting the bar very high, folks, because he was awful last year. Yeah. But the key is QJ could suddenly find his way. Nico Collins at this time last year was being belittled as a wasted draft pick and an average guy, below average guy at best. He kind of changed the mindset of everybody in 1 year with a better quarterback. And QJ, Joshua Palmer, they've got the option to step up and be the guy more so than Ladd McConkey. But McConkey is the one that everybody likes. At prices, at their current ADPs, I'll prefer the cheaper option who's got a little history in the league over the rookie. But that's the way you got to look at every position in fantasy football, Professor. It's all about opportunity.
So you do at kind of getting to the end, the conclusions, the best ball you bring in, the better than zero strategy. And I know I've tweeted links to it before, and I know it's buried in here. We got so much stuff, folks. It's, I can't help it. We just got a bunch of stuff out there, and you'll just have to hunt around. But I don't know, I don't think you can search the site by keywords. Look, this is a free site, okay? When we finally, ESPN finally buys us out, we'll have fancy stuff. Okay, right now this is shoestring stuff. So you get what you pay for here with us, and we're not charging anything yet. We'll see how our betting does this year. Our beta test. I got secret research that Dennis and we've been we're gonna feast. I got a feeling. I got to set up my account, Dennis, because I've never really bet on a professional game before. So I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, find his adaptive strategy better than zero. And I agree with this statement. It's probably better than zero RB or elite QB or tight end. I like being adaptive. But again, adaptive to me is the landscape that I'm going into. And I've hinted metrics and things that I use. So when we do adaptive, we're deeper than probably a lot of folks are. So realize, we're using this time, hours a day. I'm usually spending 2-3 hours a day uh, during the weekday. Maybe not every day, but let me tell you, by the end of the week, it's between 10 and 20 hours. I've done stuff, and I know Dennis wrote. Anybody write this novel here has been spent some time on it. And by the way, Dennis, your grammar is so good on this. The editor barely has to do anything. Folks, I subscribe to Grammarly, and I have to. Dennis and I rule if he can get under 100 errors in grammar, then we consider it good, though. So the editor's happy with that. That's kind of his benchmarker. That's his adaptive strategy. Is using Grammarly to fix Dennis's mess here. But anyway, great article, Dennis. Great conclusions. I love the terms. You see, I love that. To me, I tell my students, get the landscape, but know the terms and the details and the processes and the procedures. And then I'll tell my students, because they're not, they just have me a semester. But if they're doing this their whole life, they need to take a strategy, a diary. And for my kids wanting to go to medical school, Dennis, this is actually where the diary came from. I call it experience diary. And any of you folks going to medical school or got kids that want to go, anytime you're interacting, volunteering, any kind of work in clinical environments for medical school, keep you a diary of things that you saw, processes, procedures, things that you thought, hey, this is a little rough. I could do this a little better. Because when you write that letter, please let me into medical school, you can go to your experience diary. So Dennis, that's probably hadn't told you that, but that's where I've been telling kids for years to make an experience diary in their volunteer work. So a lot of them are going to be vets, pharmacists, doctors, these kind of things. So experience diary. So you can see fantasy football experience. That's where the diary concept came from. And I started doing that years ago and making notes and whatnot. But anyway, love the article. Looking forward to more. And I guess that's all I got to say about this article.
Yes, so two things that I'll add. First of all, about my writing style and my use of the English language, I like to remind folks from time to time that, and they'll find this surprising, Professor.
Okay.
Because I remind my listeners on the radio station this all the time. English is not my first language. I don't know if I shared that with you before.
You haven't. I'm scared. I'm
So
scared.
English
scared
is
what you're going to tell
not
me.
my first language. I'm from Chicago.
Oh, okay.
In Chicago, gibberish is our first language. So English is our second language. But no, the whole strategy in fantasy football, the whole idea of grading yourself every year
Yes.
and having a diary that you keep. And
Yes.
and sometimes, some years, I'll be honest with you, my diary was all in my head. Okay. And I didn't necessarily write it out for every league, but I did learn something from every league, because somewhere along the course of the season, I went back and saw, if it's a failing team, why did it fail? If it's a successful team, why did it succeed? And those are, I do jot down. In the weather business, I had in my little toolkit with, all of my stuff, all of my pens and my markers and my colored pencils and my protractor and my compass and all the tools of the trade for real weather forecasters who didn't just rip and read the weather off of the National Weather Service or look at the models and say, okay, this is the divine guidance and I'm going to accept it. In real meteorology, in a real forecasting setting, you do your own map analysis. You even analyze the upper air charts and the models you go in and draw a lot on. So you've got all your colored pencils. Well, mine had one other feature that I taught to every forecaster that came after me. I had little memo books that I kept for different subjects. So I had one that was titled San Francisco, and it was all about stratus forecasting. And it was forecasts that I blew or forecasts that I got better than everybody else. Here were the patterns that led to that good forecast or that bad forecast. So I would just keep notes. And by the time I had been there 10 years, I had a couple of memo books worth of notes for that station. I'd also have my winter storm notebook. How did this winter storm beat me? How did I blow this forecast? How did I nail this forecast? I kept notes about the track of the storms versus what the model said. That's how I figured
The
out
spaghetti
along the way.
models
Yes,
for
spaghetti models
hurricanes.
for hurricanes. I had memo books for each subject, each different kind of forecasting that I would have to do. Turbulence forecasting, I had my own book for that. And the key was, if I was encountering something that looked familiar, I could look back and I had little headlines on the notes to tell me what the situation was. And I could look back and I could compare data from other forecasts. You should be able to do that in fantasy football as well. That's how I've gotten better at the fantasy football game, because I've realized, okay, I got this position figured out for this format of fantasy football. Here's how I can maximize that advantage. And those advantages are always evolving because the game of football is always evolving. So 5 years ago, zero RB or late quarterback or streaming tight end might have worked great. Nowadays, maybe not so. So you have to stay up with the times. And the best way to do that, the most efficient way to do that, is to have your own little fantasy football diary. Keep a record, and that will tell you really quick. I win a lot of money that first year of new fantasy football dynasty drafts. So how do I maximize my money? I join one or two new leagues every year. I get better at managing the chaos in a dynasty league. And it's no more difficult for me than managing 25 redraft leagues by the time all is said and done. But you can spread yourself too thin, and you've got to understand where you are at all times. But next week, Professor, we're going to dive into something else that matters big time in fantasy football.
Yeah. And Dennis, I was just pulling up my video channel. I have my own kind of channel that I kind of had going before Dennis and I got going, and I just kept up with it. So I stash all the videos that I link at our site here. And we're going to talk about opportunities from a weekly point of view. So I think I've got a way to measure opportunities. You know, it's in the past, and I've already got 3 lesson plans up here, but this is my channel content. A lot of these are you can find through the site, but I'll post this, but somewhere in here, and you guys can go and find the site here. And let's see, I think it is, and I don't know. Let's see, there's Vegas. I don't want to, we're not pulling that out yet. But anyway, you can go find this channel, my Professor The Process. It's fantasy football, Professor Fantasy One, that's The Process. So that's how I started off. What's my process? And I've got all the way 412, Dennis, videos here. I guess this is, I don't know if I can go to the end. Some people like me, some people don't. I don't know. But anyway, I've got the, I don't know where I started. I think I started in 2022. If I remember right. I don't know how to get to the end, but anyway, you can start at the beginning 2 years ago and look at 412. So Dennis, they're about 20 minutes, some much longer. Oh my God. It's like there's a lot of stuff that I've gone over, and you and I've been sharing our videos up here and linked to our site as well. So I just wanted to bring that up as since I'm recording that. So anyway, plenty of stuff. Plenty.
And that's the key. This is like a time capsule, folks, of all of the professor's strategy thoughts, all of his research.
Yes.
Whether you are brand new to the game and just want to learn more, or you've been doing this like me for 30 plus years, you will learn a lot from the professor's lessons. You'll have a good time as well. He is a very, very good instructor. So head on over to scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Check out my philosophically speaking article.
It's up.
Quarterback. Hey, by the time you're listening to this, the running back, wide receiver, and tight end will be following soon.
Oh my goodness.
Over the next 2 weeks, folks, I think there will be about 10 or 12 articles that you'll be seeing from me.
I'm tired.
Professor will have a lot of data research. Oh, that editor.
That editor is going to be real tired.
Going to be angry at me, but there'll be lots of new research from the professor, and we'll be talking about one of those research projects about volume. It's all about tracking volume on a weekly basis, as you will read in my future philosophical articles at running back, wide receiver, and tight end. When opportunity knocks, fantasy football points are scored. So head over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Check all that out. And of course, come back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.